Hi everyone. So in the previous two videos, we've discussed about the epithelial tissue and the connective tissue and the muscle tissue is also done. So that brings us to the final animal tissue, which is the nerve tissue. So let's jump on to the nerve tissue. What is the nerve tissue all about? The nerve tissue is obviously a part of the nervous system. So the nervous system contains these nerve tissues, and in this nerve tissue, you're going to find nerve cells. Now, a nerve cell is also called a neuron. So let's first look at the structure of a neuron, right? So a neuron is basically similar to any other cell, right? Now, this what I'm drawing here is not a neuron, but a normal ordinary cell. So if you take a normal, typical animal cell, you know that we have a nucleus somewhat in the center of the cell, and we have Golgi bodies and endoplasmic reticulum and different organelles as such, right? So there are different organelles in every cell, right? So similarly, if you take a nerve cell as well, there are these organelles within the cell, but there are some very unique features that make the nerve cell different to this particular typical animal cell that we know about, right? So if you take a nerve cell, if you take one side of the nerve cell, there are extensions coming out of the nerve cell. These extensions branch out like these, and these are the parts of the nerve cells that are waiting to receive stimuli or to receive the nerve signals, right? So these parts of the nerve cell are called, they're called the dendrites. They're called the dendrites. And this part of the nerve cell, this main part of the nerve cell that holds the nucleus and all other organelles, is called the cell body of the nerve cell, right? So on one side of the cell body, you have the dendrites that are branching out. And from the other side of the cell body of the neuron, you have a long extension of the cell, which kind of looks like this. So this part of the nerve cell, this part of the neuron is called the axon or the nerve fiber, right? So we say that a neuron typically has two parts. It has the cell body and the nerve fiber, right? Now, if you consider the dendrites, like I mentioned, the dendrites are the parts of the nerve cells that are waiting to receive the impulses. Remember, impulses pass as electric signals, right? So the dendrites are the ones that catch these electric signals and pass it on to the cell body, right? And from the cell body, these electric signals are then passed on to the axon and taken to the appropriate part of your body, right? So this is the pathway of the electric signals. It comes from the dendrites, passes on to the cell body, and finally goes across the axon. All right. And you know that when we talk about our nervous system, when we talk about stimuli and responses, you know that the nervous system needs to work really, really quickly, right? You need to respond to stimuli within seconds of it happening, right? So these electric signals typically move very, very fast across the neuron, and the neuron has different adaptations to increase the speed of these nerve impulses. One such adaptation in this neuron is that around this axon, there is something called the myelin sheath that has wrapped up around this axon. So you need to imagine this in a 3D manner. The myelin sheath are literally like a ring of sheath surrounding the axon, right? So this is all myelin sheath, all right? And as you can see, even in my drawing, the myelin sheath is not a continuous sheath, right? It's not just a continuous sheath. There are gaps in it. Do you see these gaps in the myelin sheath? So these gaps in the myelin sheath, they are called nodes of Ranvier, all right? And the myelin sheath, along with the nodes of Ranvier, somehow help to increase the speed of transmission of these nerve impulses. All right. Okay, so this is the basic structure of a neuron or a nerve cell. But in our body, there are actually three different types of neurons. There are three types of neurons in our body. They are called sensory neurons, and interneurons, and motor neurons. There are three types of neurons in our body. All right. Now, sensory neurons, as the name suggests, these are the neurons that are attached to our sense organs. So any neuron attached to our sense organs, our eyes, skin, nose, tongue, whatever it is, a neuron attached to a sense organ is called the sensory neuron, right? And then if you, when you consider, let's jump on to the motor neurons. The motor neurons are the neurons that are attached to muscles or glands. So motor neurons are the neurons that actually bring about a movement or a motor effect. So that's how the name motor neurons come about, right? And between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons, in the midst of our brain and spinal cord, we find interneurons. So interneurons are found within the brain or within the spinal cord. So we've learned about the reflex arc in the nervous system. So in the reflex arc, we've learned how all of these three neurons work together, right? So the signal first comes to the sensory neuron, and then the sensory neuron passes it over to the interneuron, and the interneuron finally passes it on to the motor neuron, which ultimately brings about a response, right? So that's what you need to know about the nerve tissue. And with that, we have come to the end of our animal tissues. We've learned about the epithelial tissue, and then about the connective tissue, and then the muscle tissue. And now we're done with the nerve tissue as well.